After looking at every single fuel source in the game, kelp blocks are one of the best, especially with autocrafters. Hello there, Ray here. You probably know me as that guy who's designing an automatic farm for every single item in the game of Minecraft. From beacons to mob heads, I've already designed a farm for over 1,200 of them. And this farm of mine will give you tons of kelp and kelp blocks. I designed it to focus on being efficient yet easy to build up. I have one that you can build mostly anywhere, and then I have a second one which is quicker to build up but needs an ocean to be placed inside of. We're going to start out by finding or making a flat platform that is 23 blocks in one direction and 70 blocks in the other. Then on the outside of the platform, we're going to place in a ring of slabs. Doesn't matter what type of slabs. We're going to do this on 3 sides, but then one of these long sides, we're going to come in and place in some type of wall. And we're going to take this wall up an additional 26. An easy way to count it out correctly is put the correct number of blocks in your hotbar. And then when you reach the top, you'll run out of items, and that's the correct height. Now we're going to continue this the full length of the wall. So now it should look like this. Then 1 block underneath of the wall, we're going to put in some temporary blocks. You can use dirt or netherrack or whatever, just make sure Endermen don't steal it. We're going to put in a total of 8 of them right here, and then we're going to go up 1 level, put in 7, then up 1 level and put in another 7. And then when it ends, it should be lined up so that there is a gap between this dirt and that slab over there. Then you'll continue this all the way across the full length of the wall so that it will end up looking like this. Now on either ends here, we're going to take up this side just by 1 block. So it's going to be like this all the way across until we reach this end over here. And then we'll do the same thing on the opposite side over here. So it will look like this. Now on the back side here, we're going to put in a wall, and this is going to go the full length of it so that we can hold the water in that we're going to place in next. Now at the top of the platform, we're going to come in and place in water all the way across. You could also place in like a row of ice and then break it with non-silk touch. And you could do this in survival by taking a previous water source, planting it in front, and then it's going to make a water source between 2 of them. You can repeat this process also while being a little bit more efficient if you understand how water sources are regenerated. So when complete, this water source should reach beyond this ledge here, fall down and go to the next level, then fall down and go to the next level, and then just barely reach the edge over here. Now comes the fun part of removing this floor here. Leave the walls in, but what you can do is just remove all of this bottom floor here. And what that's going to do is let the water flow downwards, but then we already made this kind of little ledge container here, which will contain it. So first, remove this entire lower platform here. And also remove the pieces that are sitting out over here, but keep the taller pieces in over there. So then when you get done, it should look like this. Now we can move on to the next platform, do the exact same thing, remove all of the blocks, including the ones that are underneath of that little wall over there. And we'll take this all the way across. And then lastly, we'll do this to the final platform here, remembering to take it all the way up to the edges, but to continue to leave in this supportive wall here, and then we'll take it all the way across this. So what we did here was we created this nice flowing water which we'll use to collect the items, while at the same time putting in a ton of water underneath where we will use that to grow in all the kelp. Now finally we can come in and remove this outer edge wall here, remove it from the lower end going upwards. When you come to this edges here, just keep moving upwards, and when you get all the way to the initial source, you will notice that the water will spew out the side, but don't worry, we have an extra piece that will catch it. And then when you remove all of this, this will also try to go this direction, but don't worry about it, that is all intended. We'll take this all the way across, and then we'll also remove this side from the lower end going upwards. And then when you're done, it should look like this. Now you just have a big floating glob of water, which is going to be really helpful because later on we won't have to put in any walls on these 3 sides, only having a wall on this side, yet it'll be able to collect the majority of the kelp this way. So now on the side that has the walls on the right hand side, we're going to count in a total of 12 blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then we're going to place in some blocks in here. Water will kind of flow around these blocks. Then we're going to place in a redstone dust there. Then we're going to place a glass above the redstone dust. and a block over here. We're also going to extend this glass over here, place in a solid block over here, extend the glass over here, and place in a repeater that's on full delay, and then place a glass over here. Then we're going to have a piston pointing outward from this side and an observer facing inwards. So the power we put into this repeater, and it'll be looped around, put back into this piston here. This is the redstone device, which will turn around the fly machine, which we're going to build next. Now on the opposite side, where the wall is on your left, we're going to count in a total of 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Then we're going to place in a piston here that has an observer pointing that direction. And then pointing into the block underneath of the piston, we're going to have a comparator. Then the comparator is going to be reading a hopper chain. So we're going to put in 2 hoppers going this direction, pointing to each other. And then from here, we're going to have hoppers going out the backside here, pointing into this one, and then pointing into that one, and then continue going this direction. And then we're going to end it off by removing this block and putting a hopper pointing back into that one. So there should be a full loop here. And then we're going to place barrels on top of all of these to prevent the hoppers from checking for items above them. And then we're going to place in redstone on top of all of them, but one of them in that corner over there. Now the comparator will read any item that we put in here. So if we have one item inside of this hopper loop, you'll see the item is going to go around in a circle. So every so often it comes past, is read by the comparator, and activates this piston here. But we don't want this piston to be activated all the time. So we're going to come in here and place in a redstone torch, which is going to lock all the hoppers, prevent the item from moving. But we want the item to move sometimes, because we're going to use this as a timer in order to tell us when to actually harvest the kelp. We're going to place in a repeater on 2 ticks, then an observer pointing into that, and then over here we're going to place in a block with a repeater on top of that, and then over here we're going to place in a daylight sensor. So now every time the daylight sensor turns on one time, it's going to activate the redstone, allowing the item within it to move around it. So essentially a really long clock. So just go ahead and set this to day mode. And if you're playing on your Minecraft world where you normally have day and night, then you could just leave this counter in, which is a counter of 5, because we're not counting this hopper here because it's not being powered. But if you are playing on a world where you sleep away the nights, then you want to put in a total of 10 hoppers here and have all of them covered in redstone. And that way, either way, the machine will turn on after the kelp has grown a certain height. If you find out the kelp are producing too much frame lag for you, you can always make the kelp harvest more often by having less redstone on top of this. So now it's time to build a fly machine, which is going to be destroying and breaking down the kelp. We're going to place a block in front of that one there, and a sticky piston right here. Then a honey block there, an observer right here, and then another sticky piston facing backwards, which is pointing into another honey block, which is then has another observer on top of it, pointing over on top of this piston. Now we're going to continue this honey all the way over to the wall over here, and we'll get within one block of it, and then we're going to place in a different type of block so the honey doesn't stick onto the wall and try to move the entire thing. Now we're going to build the other side of the wing, so we're going to add in 8 more honey blocks over here. We're using honey and not slime because slime will actually shove the items off the edge of the farm, where honey will just break them and let them slowly rise to the top. We also cap this off by putting in a different block just to save a little bit on honey. And notice there is a gap here. This gap is here on purpose so that we give a little bit of room for the items to float upwards before we try to move them that direction, since we don't actually have any wall to prevent the items from getting shot off that direction over there. So now we have the entire fly machine in. We also have the clock, which is going to send the fly machine that direction, and we have a device on that side to send it back. Now we're ready for the main thing, which is the kelp itself. We're going to go ahead and fill in the kelp right in front of the actual flying machine here. We'll start over here, and then we'll kind of jut over and move it all the way along the entire length of the fly machine, because this is where it's able to break it off. And then we're going to take this filling in of kelp all the way across the entire thing until we get to this end over here. And then we're going to have the last bit of kelp and right in front of this turning around device. So once you planted all your kelp, it should look like this. Now we get to the most important part of the tutorial, double checking that you left a like on the video. Now we're ready to try the fly machine. We can activate it just by toggling this from day to night. You'll see then all of a sudden it's going to extend this, activate the fly machine. It's going to sweep through Any kelp that's taller than the lowest one will then be broken off, and the items will be sent upwards because we are in some water. I'll try to float to the very top of the water. And then once the flying machine reaches the end, we've already built in our device which will turn it around and send it back. So it'll get a signal when it touches it, and then it will activate the opposite side, sending it back the other direction. Now we can watch the actual kelp float to the top. Notice that once it gets close to the flowing water, it then gets pushed by the flowing water that we put at the very top. Sometimes it gets a little bit of downward momentum, but eventually come over here and come in contact with the wall. Otherwise, they'll just float back up again and try again. And that's why we have this wall here to catch any of the low flowing kelp so they don't end up getting kicked out of the farm. While the flowing water itself slowly moves all the items to the edge easily without having to have some complicated collection system. Now that the kelp's all hitting up against this wall, there's a little gap here and it falls all the way down, ends up falling out of the farm. What we need to do is have it so we can actually collect the items to a central location. We'll put it over here at the same side as where we have the flying machine start piece. So the way we're going to collect the items, we're going to start on the back side here, and we're going to use water to collect them because that's just easiest and cheapest. We're going to come over here and go downwards 2 blocks underneath of where the water's at. Then this is where your floor will be. If this is underground, you can just dig this out, or you can build out whatever blocks you want to. We're going to build in a little channel for the water to go down. Each water source can go a total of 8 blocks, so we have to make sure it's at least 8 blocks long. Then the water will start over here, it'll flow that direction, and we can remove those blocks. You can see the water only gets this far, so we need to continue it. We can either go downwards and use gravity to make it go longer, or we can use a little bit of water trickery to make it continue. We'll place down any type of ice you have there, place some blocks beside it. We'll place a top slab in here, a block over here, and now we'll come in and continue our little trough for the water to set inside of so that we can put in another water source. So the next water source doesn't get placed down here, but instead up against this block over here. And notice it'll flow that direction, but it also flowed the opposite direction. So we need to stop this. You can either place in sign or like a banner, or you can even use like lichen, which isn't a tile entity like the other 2 blocks. So it produces a little bit less lag for your game. And now we're back to the same scenario again. So we can just repeat this entire process all the way to the opposite side where we can reach the end. Now, while putting in the water collection system, let me tell you a story. There once was a little red button. It was a sad little button. Then one day it got clicked on and it became a happy button. End of story. Okay, so now we've reached the end of it. So all the items that come off of the farm will eventually come right here to this location. So now let's put in a collection system so you can collect all the kelp. Since it does all come at once, you need quite a few hoppers in order to keep up with it. We're going to place chests starting over here, right where the water starts flowing downwards. And then we're going to move them all the way across to here. So it should look like this here. And now we're going to come in and add in a hopper for each of these. When all the items come flowing in, the hopper will pick up most of them, and the rest of them will kind of end up down here. So this will get most items, but then the items will kind of sit down here and they need to be picked up a little bit faster. So we're going to make the items sit between 4 hoppers. We got 2 hoppers here, and we'll just knock out this here and then add in 2 more hoppers facing into those chests there. We'll make them double chest as well. And we're going to come over here and place in another set of double chests right here. And then we're going to make these last 2 hoppers face the opposite direction into those. So now we have 4 hoppers here. We just need to get the items to sit between all 4 of them. So we're going to come in and place cake there as well as over here. Now in order to get the items all the way in that corner there so that they're on top of all 4 of the hoppers, we're going to have to push the items a little bit that direction. We're going to come in with a waterway, which is going to come in from this direction and push them over there. So we're going to extend this out like so, all the way to over here. And then we're also going to extend this. So it looks like this here. And then we're going to cap this off and place in water right here. The water will flow so that it's just barely able to reach this block here, which any items that come over here will then get pushed in that direction. So they'll get pushed 2 different directions and we'll line up perfectly in that corner over there, so that all 4 of these hoppers can pull in the items before they despawn. Rather than putting in a little circular water system, this will also work. Now you're done if you just want to collect the kelp. But next part I'll show you guys is the smelting system, which will automatically smelt down the kelp using the kelp blocks, which will also turn around and produce with the new auto crafter, which is coming in 1.21. So you can be ready for that by building up this next section, or you could just smelt them down to the dried kelp and then manually turn them into kelp blocks. So now 2 blocks underneath of these chests here, we're going to place in a smoker. Now we're going to place smokers in directly underneath the same spot where we have those chests there. It's to be like this, and then also this direction like so. Now we're going to have hoppers pointing down into each of these, straight down into them, so they'll be taking all the kelp and pushing them into them. And then starting on the side that's closest to the farm, we're going to place in a hopper facing downwards, and then we're going to have ones facing into the previous ones. And we're going to take that across all of these chests here. This is going to distribute all the kelp across all the smokers. We're also going to hook up these other couple of chests that we have here at the end. We're going to do this just by placing in hoppers coming out of these, collecting those 2 chests over here, and also hoppers coming over here over top of these 2 chests. So pick up everything from the chest and push it into the smoker. Now in the corner of the smoker and 1 block below it, we're going to have a crafter facing upwards. And we're going to have a dropper facing upwards right there. Now we're able to take all the outputs, which is going to come out the bottom of these smokers, and we'll push them into this crafter over here. So we're going to start with hoppers pointing into that crafter, and then we're going to extend them over top of all of these smokers here. So all the items that do end up smoking will get moved into the crafter, where we're going to craft the dried kelp into kelp blocks. And on top of these hoppers here, we're going to place in some composters to stop them from checking for items above them. Now to make the kelp blocks get crafted faster by our crafter, we can actually hook up a second hopper line. Instead of pushing them all into one side, we can have them divided by 2 sides. And then we'll come in and place some composters on top of that. Now to power this crafter and this dropper here, which is after it's done crafted, it's going to move the items upwards. And now we need to use the crafted kelp blocks to repower the smokers. So we're going to have some furnaces pointing into these smokers and also into these here. And then we need to distribute the kelp blocks across all of them. So we're going to have hoppers going around this entire loop, where it's going to end up connected to this dropper. So dropper is going to push it into this hopper line here. We're going to put composters on top of all this. The items are going to move along the hopper line, going all the way around this direction. Push them all into the smokers, and the ones that can't go into the smokers, we can have all the excess kelp blocks end up over here in this chest here. We'll just turn this hopper this direction. So after it fills those up, we can then come here to get our kelp blocks. And you'll probably get quite a few kelp blocks over time, so make sure to put in plenty of storage. Now if you want to get XPs from these smokers here, we can come in and place in a platform, which is going to be underneath of all of these hoppers here. And then we're going to place in levers just below the hoppers, so we can lock these hoppers above, so we can pull out the items from the actual smokers to get XPs. So now when it activates, you'll see it go through and break them all off. And since you don't have walls on 3 sides, it did make it cheaper, but you'll get a couple items that do fall over the edges here, as well as on this side here. But most of the items will go straight up into the water stream and then get dropped down our wall and into our collection water stream over here. See, all the items are getting moved along, and with our extra continued water here, even items that land on top can keep moving along, as well as ones underneath can go sliding underneath the ice over top of all of these hoppers here, and then automatically be put down into the smokers down below. If you start the smokers off, since there's no kelp to start with, you're going to have to put in some fuel source to get these started, and then afterwards they will automatically resupply their own fuel. This farm will produce around 10,000 kelp per hour, or around 12,000 smelts per hour per farm. Plus, if you collect the XPs that are being stored up inside of the smoker, you'll get around 614 XPs per hour. Now you could use the kelp for a bone meal farm, but there is more efficient farms. I would recommend using my moss farm, which is a great source of getting tons of bone meal. For the farm to run, you do need to be within a random ticked area around the player, which means the farm has to be within 8 chunks of the player or less. Easy way to figure this out is by setting your render distance to 8. As long as none of the farm starts getting engulfed by the fog, it will continue to be working. The water version uses the same amount of components as the other one. The main difference is you don't have the big wall on the side, so you don't have to build that, so it's a little bit easier to build up. And because of all the different ocean water sources, we're able to get the items to come all the way to the top so we can collect them with a single water stream at the top rather than having the wall down below. And there is a little glass tube that goes all the way down to the bottom so that light can reach our daylight sensor. And just like the previous one, you need to also place in a floor. The only difference is this floor has 8, then another 8, and then another 8. And then each of these steps have their very own water source. So there's one water source there, a separate water source here, and another one here. And then just like before, you come in and remove all of the bottom pieces before coming in and removing the side pieces. But in this one, I do have some extra side pieces which I leave there just to help the water from flowing all over the place. You can capture a few extra items by having these pieces in. If you want to look at this design or the previous design in more detail, I do have schematics for both of them as well as world downloads, so you can copy it block for block and it should work the same as these. Also, for any extra tips and tricks, make sure to check the description where I'll also put the newest version if anything changes throughout the years. Now let's see how I design an automatic farm for every single item in the game of Minecraft with this playlist here. Help me continue to make free farms for the Minecraft community by joining me as a supporter like on my Patreon. Otherwise, just share this with your favorite Minecrafters and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye!